My mother's voice still echoed in my head the night the snowstorm hit. We all agreed you're not welcome at Christmas. All, meaning my two brothers, my aunt, even my grandmother, who barely remembered my name some days. They all agreed I wasn't welcome in the house I'd been paying the mortgage for, the house they lived in rent-free. I had bought it for my mother when her health got shaky, signed the papers myself, took on the payments, fixed every leak, replaced every appliance. I did everything a good daughter was supposed to do. But suddenly I wasn't family enough to sit at the same table for Christmas. So I stopped paying the mortgage, not out of anger at first, out of disbelief. Surely someone would call, apologize, try to fix things. No one did. Not a text, not a knock on my door, nothing. Month 1 passed, then month 2, then month 3. The bank notices started arriving at my address, not theirs. I opened every one. By month 3, the house was in pre-foreclosure. Still, not a word from them. Then, one morning, my phone buzzed so violently I thought it might crack the table. It was my mother. You need to come over. Now. Her voice was thin, frantic, terrified. I drove over slowly. Calmly, I even put on music. When I pulled up, my entire family was standing on the porch, shivering, panicked, clustered together like frightened animals. My brothers looked like they hadn't slept. My aunt clutched a folder of bank letters. My mother's face was splotchy and red. She rushed toward me. You stop paying the mortgage, she demanded, her voice breaking. Why would you do that to us?
We could lose the house.
I stepped out of the car, shut the door gently, and looked at them, really looked at them. These people who voted unanimously to ban me from a holiday in the home I paid for. You told me I'm not welcome here, I said softly. I respected that. My older brother threw his hands up.
That was just Christmas.
We didn't mean. Actually, I interrupted, pulling out my phone. I recorded the conversation. Their faces froze. I played the clip, their voices crystal clear. We all agreed she's not welcome at Christmas. She's dramatic anyway. Maybe she'll finally get the hint. It's better without her. Silence. The wind howled around us. My mother stepped closer, tears spilling. We were angry. We didn't think, please, you can fix this, right? I looked up at the house I bought. The house they used. The house they told me I wasn't welcome in. No, I said with a calm I had never felt before. I can't fix it. And I won't. My brother cursed under his breath. My aunt gasped. My mother begged. But I simply turned, got back into my car, and rolled down the window. You wanted a Christmas without me, I said. Looks like you're getting everything you wished for. I drove away as they shouted after me, pleading, bargaining, panicking. 3 weeks later, the bank completed the foreclosure. They were forced to move into a tiny rental on the outskirts of town. I heard through distant relatives that they blamed each other, that holidays were awkward, that the family dynamic shattered. I celebrated the next Christmas in my own apartment, small, quiet, peaceful. No yelling, no judgment, no betrayal. Just me finally welcome in my own life. And that was enough. The moment my mother said the words, time seemed to stretch into something slow and suffocating, like thick syrup coating the air. I stood in the doorway of the living room, still holding the bag of groceries I'd brought, ingredients for the pumpkin pie I made every year, the one everyone fought over because it tasted like nostalgia and holidays, and the comfort of belonging. But that year, the comfort wasn't offered to me. My mother didn't look at me when she spoke. She kept her eyes fixed on the television, her fingers curled tightly around the remote as if she needed something to hold on to, or else her guilt might betray her. Her voice was sharp, clipped, almost rehearsed. We all agreed, you're not welcome at Christmas. For a moment, I wondered if I'd misheard her. Maybe she meant something else. Maybe she meant I wasn't welcome to cook this year. Or maybe she was joking in that awkward way she sometimes did when she didn't know how to express frustration. But then she finally looked up, and there was no softness in her eyes, no trace of a joke, only resolve. Cold, impersonal resolve, the kind you have when you make a vote about a stranger. My brothers were seated on the couch, side by side, stiff, avoiding eye contact. My older brother tapped his knee nervously. My younger brother kept glancing at his phone, as though he desperately wished he could teleport out of the room. My aunt stood near the window, arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin line. Even my grandmother, who spent most days drifting in and out of memories long faded, was perched upright in her armchair as if she had been briefed on this moment. That was the part that made my stomach twist. They weren't surprised I was hearing this. They were only surprised, maybe, that I didn't walk away instantly. I set the grocery bag down on the entryway table. The paper crinkled loudly in the silence, like a fire catching. I opened my mouth, but for a long few seconds, no words came out. Everything I had ever done for them piled into my mind at once. The late night drives to take my mother to the hospital. The weekends I spent fixing things around the house. The mortgage payments I'd made without complaint, even when money was tight and I had to skip buying myself new shoes or replace my cracked phone screen. They all knew I paid the mortgage. They all knew I owned the house legally. I didn't hang it over them. I never once asked for rent because it was family. Family didn't need contracts. Family didn't need tracking apps or invoices. Family loved because that's what blood was supposed to do. But apparently, blood wasn't thicker than holiday preferences. What do you mean you all agreed? I finally managed. My voice came out too soft, too fragile, like it might break if someone breathed on it wrong. My mother sighed, as though she were exhausted by the mere effort of explaining. It's better this way. Things have been tense. Tense, I repeated, feeling the word like a bruise being pressed. You're always so emotional, my aunt chimed in, adjusting her sweater, refusing to meet my eyes. We want a peaceful Christmas this year. No drama. The hypocrisy hit me like a slap. I had spent my entire life absorbing their drama, my mother's guilt trips, my aunt's cutting remarks, my brother's messes. I had been the peacekeeper, the fixer, the one who tried to hold everyone together, even when they didn't deserve to be held. I had cried alone after family fights, cleaned up after arguments that weren't mine, apologized for things I didn't do, because someone had to end the tension. And now they were telling me I was the source of it. My older brother finally looked at me, guilt flickering in his eyes. It was a vote, he muttered. We just thought it'd be easier if you sat this year out. A vote? I repeated slowly. On whether I'm allowed to spend Christmas in the house I pay for. No one answered. A painful, stunned silence swallowed the room. I felt something inside me shift, not break, not shatter, but realign. Like when your eyes adjust to the dark and suddenly you can see the outlines of everything clearly. These people weren't protecting peace. They weren't trying to avoid drama. They were avoiding accountability. They wanted all the benefits of my labor, my care, my money, but not the inconvenience of my presence. It hit me then, with a clarity that almost hurt. I was useful to them, but I wasn't valued. My mother stood, brushing imaginary crumbs off her sweater, a gesture she always did when she wanted to appear composed. We'll still see you, she said, as if offering a consolation prize. Just after the holidays, maybe for New Year's, if things settle. Things settle. As though my existence created waves in their perfect little pond. My grandmother gave a small, confused smile, clearly unaware of the emotional weight in the room. We'll save you leftovers, she offered, her voice trembling with age. I swallowed hard. Don't bother. My younger brother shifted uncomfortably. Come on, it's just Christmas. It's not a big deal. But it was. It was the biggest deal. It wasn't about the holiday itself. It was about what the holiday represented: family, togetherness, home. And suddenly, I wasn't part of the picture. My mother clapped her hands once, briskly, the way she did when she was done with a topic. Anyway, that's that. We'll talk later. That's that. I repeated softly, almost to myself, memorizing the shape of those words. Because I knew, with a calmness that surprised me, that this moment would split my life into before and after. Before their decision, and after I learned how little I truly mattered to them when they could no longer extract something from me. I nodded once, picked up the grocery bag, and turned toward the door. As I stepped outside into the cold air, snowflakes drifting lazily around me, the house behind me felt unfamiliar, as if I had already become a stranger to it. For the first time, I realized they were right about one thing: I wasn't welcome. But they had no idea what that decision would cost them. And neither did I, yet. Revenge at Christmas. The strangest part about those 3 months wasn't the silence itself. It was how normal the silence began to feel. At first, I waited for my phone to buzz the way someone waits for a kettle to whistle. Every vibration, every notification, every meaningless email made my heart jump. I kept expecting a message from my mother or one of my brothers, something like, "We should talk," or "Maybe we were too harsh." I would have accepted even the smallest sign of remorse, even one line that proved I meant more to them than a seasonal inconvenience. But none came. In the first month, I built imaginary scenarios in my head. Maybe my mother would call crying. Maybe my brothers would knock on my apartment door, awkward and apologetic, admitting they made a mistake. Maybe my aunt would send a voice note in that overly dramatic tone of hers, the one dripping with guilt she couldn't hide even when she tried. But the days passed, and nothing happened. By the middle of the month, I began checking my phone less. I stopped glancing at the family group chat. I stopped waiting for the apology that wasn't coming. Silence became its own kind of answer, and it was far more truthful than any words they might have given me. Around week 5, Christmas decorations started appearing around town. Shops played cheerful music that grated at my nerves, and lights glittered across rooftops. Everywhere I went, people talked about holiday plans, family dinners, gift lists, traditions. And every time, something inside me twisted. I didn't tell anyone what happened. I couldn't bring myself to say it out loud, because saying it would make it real in a way that felt too humiliating. My own family had cast me out of a holiday I cherished, in the house I paid for. I avoided driving past the neighborhood where the house stood. I avoided the grocery store my mother loved, the coffee shop where my brothers lounged on weekends, even the pharmacy where my aunt bought her overpriced lotion. I carved out a different map of the city, one that kept me far away from the reminders of the people who decided I didn't belong. Still, I imagined them. I pictured them decorating the tree without me. I pictured them hanging the stockings. I pictured the warm glow of lights in the windows. And with every picture, the distance between us grew colder and more final. Meanwhile, the bank notices continued, first by email, then by mail, each one sterner and more urgent. I opened every envelope with steady, almost clinical hands, reading the bold warnings one by one. In another life, I might have felt shame or panic. But in this life, I only felt a strange, grounded calm. They weren't noticing. They weren't even aware of the storm building around them. By the second month, the silence had become a wall. Christmas came and went. I spent it quietly in my apartment, watching old movies, making myself a small dinner, lighting a single candle. There were no gifts exchanged, no laughter, no traditions. But there were also no cruel remarks, no cold gazes, no sense of being tolerated instead of loved. The absence hurt, but it also soothed. When I imagined what my family's Christmas was like, I felt a hollow ache. Then, slowly, the ache softened. It turned into something else, something like acceptance. They had made their choice. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't scrambling to fix it. After the new year, I expected someone, anyone, to contact me about the mortgage. Surely by now, they must have seen a letter. Surely my mother must have opened one by accident. Surely my brothers must have noticed something looked off. But nothing happened. It was surreal, almost comical, in a bleak way. They were so comfortable inside the bubble of their own entitlement that they truly believed I would always be there, holding everything together, no matter how cruelly they treated me. In the middle of month 2, I finally allowed myself to drive past the house. It was early evening. Light snow dusted the grass and roof. Warm amber light glowed from the living room window. I slowed my car and watched from the street. There they were, my family, sitting together around the fireplace. My mother laughed at something my aunt said. My older brother held a mug of something warm, his feet propped up on the ottoman I'd bought last spring. My younger brother scrolled mindlessly on his phone. They looked comfortable, cozy, undisturbed. And I wasn't even a distant thought in the room. I realized then that my absence didn't ripple through their lives the way theirs rippled through mine. Their world continued uninterrupted. Mine had cracked open. And maybe that was the clearest sign of all. Our relationships had never been equal. I drove away before anyone could look up and see me. By month 3, the bank's letters had grown urgent enough that even a blind person would have noticed something was wrong. I imagined the envelopes piling up in my mother's small wicker mail basket, sitting on the kitchen counter like a quiet threat. I pictured them opening holiday cards and bills but leaving the official-looking letters untouched, stacking them aside with the unspoken assumption that I, always me, would handle them eventually. I could have called. I could have texted. I could have warned them. But they had acted as though I didn't exist. So I let them feel what that was really like. January turned into February. The cold deepened. The final pre-foreclosure notice arrived at my address, thicker than all the others. I opened it while sitting on my bed, listening to the wind rattle the window. The document was clear and absolute. Pay now or the house would move to the next stage. I wondered how long it would take for my family to notice. I wondered who would panic first. My mother.
My aunt.
Would my brothers accuse each other of not paying attention? Would they blame me? Would they pretend they didn't understand how things reached this point? The silence remained, heavy, unbroken, almost ominous. And then 10 days after the final notice arrived, my phone finally rang. It buzzed violently on the table, skittering slightly against the wood. The name on the screen was one I hadn't seen in months. My mother. I stared at it for several seconds before answering. When I finally pressed the button, I didn't say hello. I just listened. Her voice came through frantic, breathless, laced with a fear I had never heard from her before. "We need you to come to the house," she said, her tone cracking. "Something's wrong. Something's very, very wrong." I exhaled slowly, my heartbeat steady and calm. Of course something was wrong. For the first time in their lives, they were facing a consequence they couldn't pretend away. And they needed me. But the days when I rushed to save them were gone. And they were about to learn that in the most painful way possible. The panic in my mother's voice stayed in my ears long after the call ended, vibrating like a struck bell. It was the first time I had heard genuine fear from her, fear unfiltered, messy, and too real to disguise. I didn't respond right away. I didn't promise to come. I didn't reassure her. I simply let her words settle in the room, cold and heavy, then set my phone down on the counter. For 10 minutes I walked around my apartment, the way someone might walk around a memory they don't know how to process. Part of me wanted to rush over the way I used to, the way I always did. That reflex was still alive, buried under layers of hurt and exhaustion. Another part, the louder part now, reminded me of the vote, the dismissal, the silence. The people who wanted me gone were now desperate for me to return. I finally grabbed my keys, not because they deserved it, not because I wanted to fix anything, but because I needed to see what desperation looked like on their faces. I needed to understand whether any of them had truly learned something, or whether they only cared because the roof over their heads was slipping away. The closer I drove to the house, the tighter my chest became. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles paled, not from fear but from bracing myself. The sky hung low and gray, the kind of sky that pressed down on you, heavy and unforgiving. A thin layer of frost coated the roads, making everything shimmer with a cold, unfriendly light. When I turned onto the street, I saw all their cars parked crookedly across the driveway, as if they had arrived in a frenzy. I parked at the curb. I didn't pull into the driveway. I wanted the distance, needed it like a boundary drawn in chalk. My family stood clustered on the porch, huddled together like a group of people waiting for a verdict. My mother paced in small frantic circles, her hands wringing the hem of her sweater. My brothers stood behind her, stiff as statues. My aunt clutched a stack of letters that I recognized instantly, bank envelopes, unopened, swollen with consequences. The moment I stepped out of the car, they all looked at me with an expression I had never seen directed my way: helplessness. My mother rushed down the steps toward me. "Where have you been?" she demanded, as if she had any right to demand anything. "Why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you say something was wrong?" I didn't answer. I simply walked past her and toward the porch. I looked at my brothers. Neither of them could meet my eyes. My aunt stared at me as though seeing a stranger. "What's going on?" I finally asked, my voice calm and steady. My aunt thrust the stack of letters toward me. "These came," she said breathlessly. "Final notices, foreclosure warnings. We didn't understand. We thought there must be some mistake." My older brother stepped forward. "You stopped paying," he said, his voice tight with accusation. "Why would you do that?" There it was, the tone I expected. Not remorse, not self-reflection, only blame, always blame. My mother's voice wavered. "We're going to lose the house. You should have come to us sooner." I let the words sink in, let the weight of their entitlement fully reveal itself. My mother reached for my arm, but I stepped back. "You're acting like this was unexpected," I said slowly. "Like none of you had any reason to think I might step back." My younger brother finally spoke. "Why didn't you tell us there was a problem?" I almost laughed. The sound almost broke out of me, sharp and bitter. You didn't think anything might be wrong when you told me I wasn't welcome for Christmas. In the house I pay for. An uncomfortable silence spread across the porch. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it again. My aunt looked away. My brother shifted awkwardly. We didn't mean it like that. My mother whispered at last, clutching her own elbows as if she expected the wind to knock her down. Things got heated. We didn't think. No, I cut in gently but firmly. You didn't think. You voted. You held a meeting about me. You chose to exclude me. And then you expected everything else to stay the same. My aunt's voice trembled. We thought you would understand. I did, I replied. I understood very clearly. I walked up the remaining steps onto the porch. I could smell the familiar scent of pine cleaner from inside. It hit me with a wave of nostalgia that made my chest ache. But it wasn't enough to make me forget. Not anymore. Why didn't you tell us? My mother repeated, voice cracking as if that question was her lifeline. Because I assumed. I said that adults open their mail. My older brother groaned in frustration. So this is revenge. Seriously. You're going to make all of us lose the house just because of one argument. That wasn't an argument, I said quietly. It was a rejection. A deliberate one. You didn't want me here. So I acted accordingly. My mother collapsed onto the porch swing, her face buried in her hands. We'll be homeless, she whispered. We have nowhere to go. I looked at her for a long time. My mother had never looked small before. She had always been loud, firm, impossible to shake. But now, she looked like someone who had just realized the ground beneath her had been cracking for months. My younger brother stepped closer to me, his expression softer than the others. Can you fix this? He asked. Please. There was. Not an apology, not acknowledgement. A request. A plea for the same reliability they had mocked and taken advantage of for years. I met his eyes. Do any of you understand? I said slowly. What it felt like to be told I wasn't welcome in my own home. Do you understand what 3 months of silence felt like? Do you understand that not one of you checked on me, even once? No one answered. The cold wind swept through the porch, making the letters in my aunt's hands flutter like frightened birds. Finally, my mother looked up, tears streaking her cheeks. We need you, she whispered. Please. It was the first honest thing she had said in years. But needing someone is not the same as valuing them. I took a step back, then another. I lived for years trying to earn your love, I said. Trying to prove my worth, trying to keep this family afloat. But I'm done being the only one who gives. My mother sobbed. My brothers stared at the floor. My aunt shook her head in disbelief. I walked down the steps. No one tried to stop me. Not really. They were too stunned, too undone. At my car door, I paused and looked back at them. You didn't want me at Christmas, I said softly. You made your choice. Now you get to live with all of it. I got into the car and drove away. Behind me, the house loomed like a sinking ship. And for once, I wasn't the one trying to keep it from drowning. When I walked back toward my car and they begged me to return, I thought the moment of reckoning had already happened. I thought the shock on their faces, the panic in their voices, the realization that the house was slipping through their fingers, that was the climax. That was the justice. But it wasn't. The real reckoning came when I returned a few hours later, not because they deserved a second chance, but because I needed closure, the kind of closure you can only get by letting someone hear the truth directly from your mouth, without filters, without cushioning, without excuses. I needed them to finally understand the weight of their decision. I needed them to understand me. When I pulled into the driveway that evening, the porch light was on, casting a yellow halo on the snow. They were all inside now, no longer panicked and shouting in the cold. The house was quiet when I opened the front door, the kind of quiet that comes only after everyone has been arguing and is too drained to continue. My mother was seated at the kitchen table. Her eyes were swollen from crying. My aunt stood behind her, arms crossed, protective and anxious. My brothers sat on either side, looking like two children awaiting punishment. The stack of foreclosure papers was spread out in the middle of the table like a crime scene. For a moment, none of them spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator. My mother finally broke the silence. "Are you here to fix it?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "No," I said, my tone calm and even. "I'm here to talk." My older brother scoffed under his breath. "What is there to talk about? The bank wants money. You stopped paying. That's it." My aunt shushed him. "Let her speak." I pulled out a chair and sat across from them. The wood felt cold beneath my hands. The same table where we'd shared thousands of meals now felt like a negotiation desk in a room full of strangers. "Do you remember the day you told me I wasn't welcome for Christmas?" I asked quietly. My mother flinched, and guilt washed over her face like a tidal wave. She nodded slowly. "I said things I didn't mean." "You all said things," I corrected. "It wasn't just you." My younger brother looked up from his folded hands. "We didn't think it would hurt you that much." The simplicity of his words stunned me. I stared at him, completely floored by how truly little they grasped. "That's the problem," I said, leaning forward, my voice steady but edged with something sharp. "You didn't think? You never think about me unless you need something. You didn't think about the effort I put into this house. You didn't think about how hard I worked to support all of you. You didn't think about how it would feel to be voted out of my own holiday." My aunt shifted uncomfortably. "We were frustrated that day. Family fights happen. You know how emotions get. Then why didn't you call after?" I asked, staring her down. "Why not a single text? Not one person checked on me. Not one of you asked if I was okay." My mother wiped her eyes with a trembling hand. "We thought you needed space." "No," I said, my voice deepening. "You thought I would come crawling back. You thought I would beg for a place at the table. You assumed I was so desperate for your acceptance that I wouldn't dare stay away for long." My older brother looked away, jaw clenched. "You all assumed things," I continued. "You assumed I would always pay. You assumed I would always show up. You assumed I would always fix everything. You assumed I would always forgive you." My mother's tears fell again. "You've always been the strong one." "Being strong," I said softly, "doesn't mean being abused." The words hit the table with the weight of a stone. No one breathed. My aunt finally spoke, her voice fragile. "So what now? Are you going to let us lose everything? Is that what you want?" I looked at her for a long moment. "What I want," I said, "is to finally be seen, to be respected, to be treated like a person, not a tool." My mother reached across the table, her hand shaking. "We're sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry. We should never have said that to you. I was wrong." My brothers exchanged glances, uncomfortable, stiff, but slowly nodding. "We were wrong too," my older brother admitted, his voice rough. "We messed up." I wanted to feel satisfaction. I wanted their apology to fill all the empty spaces inside me, but it didn't. It didn't even touch the surface. "Thank you," I said quietly. But an apology doesn't erase 3 months of silence, or the years of being treated like I'm only useful when you need something. My mother's lip quivered. "What can we do? Tell us. We'll do anything." Her desperation was real, but so was my clarity. "You can accept that some consequences can't be undone," I said. "This house of the mortgage, it's already too late." My aunt's face drained of color. "But you could still try," she whispered. "There's still time." "There was time," I replied. "For months. For years. But you only came to me when you realized you needed something." My younger brother looked at me with wide eyes, the first to understand. "You're hurt," he said quietly. "Like really hurt." "Yes," I said, "and I'm done pretending I'm not." My mother sobbed openly now. "I can't believe this is happening," she whispered. "I can't believe we're going to lose everything." "You're not losing everything," I said gently. "You're losing the house, and maybe that's the cost of learning what family should truly be." My aunt shook her head. "You're punishing us?" "I'm protecting myself," I said. My older brother leaned forward. "Are you really going to walk away? Just like that? After everything you've done for us?" "That's exactly why I'm walking away," I said. "Because I've done everything for you, and you threw me out the moment it was convenient." Silence fell again, heavy, thick, suffocating. I stood up slowly, pushing the chair back. My mother's voice cracked as she whispered, "Don't go. Please. Don't leave us like this." I took a long breath and met her tear-filled eyes. "You left me first," I said, and then I walked out. Their cries followed me to the door, but I didn't turn around. They had finally heard the truth, but it was far too late to save the home that had never truly felt like mine. The silence after their return was colder than the winter air outside, but it didn't stay silent for long. Word travels fast in families built on gossip and selective memory, and mine was no different. It started with my sister calling, her voice syrup sweet with feigned concern as she said, "We heard you, might have misunderstood Christmas. Mom didn't really mean it like that." The absurdity almost made me laugh. Misunderstood. As if the words "you're not welcome" had any room for interpretation. As if the weeks of quiet that followed weren't deliberate, calculated, and convenient for all of them. But now they wanted to rewrite history because the house, the one I had been paying for, maintaining, and silently carrying on my back, wasn't the stable shelter they took for granted anymore. Once the mortgage payments stopped, reality arrived with the precision of a blade. The notices came, the panic followed, and then, as if summoned by the very fear they tried to hide, they showed up again. At first, they pretended it was coincidence. We were just checking in. We thought we'd visit. It's been too long. But their eyes gave them away every time, scanning corners of the place, measuring the tension in the air, calculating how much trouble they were in and how much they needed me to fix it. For them, not for myself. The neighbors noticed, too. They'd known for months that I was the one living there, mowing the lawn, handling repairs, receiving mail. Some had witnessed the Christmas blow up from their windows, seen my mother slam the door, seen me stand outside on the porch with my keys still in hand, stunned. So when my family returned all eager and suddenly affectionate, the neighbors exchanged looks with me, the kind that asked, "Why are they here now?" And I could only shrug because that question had been echoing in my head since the moment I saw them pull into the driveway. Inside the house, the desperation became harder to hide. My brother walked around touching furniture he hadn't paid for, inspecting fixtures he didn't maintain, asking vague questions like, everything good with the bills lately?" My aunt, who had avoided me for years unless she needed something, casually said, "The family home is important. We can't let it go, As if that pronoun had meant anything back when I was the one scraping my bank account to keep things afloat. As if they had been there through sleepless nights worrying about foreclosure. As if they had carried any of this with me. My mother, in particular, danced around the subject with expert emotional manipulation. She'd sigh dramatically, look at me with watery eyes, and say things like, "I know we had a misunderstanding, but families come back together eventually." Every word was crafted like bait on a hook. She wasn't trying to repair a relationship, she was trying to keep her house. She wanted me to forgive her just enough to resume being useful, just enough to rewind my decision, just enough to clean up the mess that she had created when she told me I wasn't welcome. But forgiveness doesn't grow in soil poisoned by betrayal, and usefulness wasn't something I was offering anymore. The shift in power didn't happen all at once, it unfolded slowly, deliciously, as the truth dawned on them like a storm cloud rolling over clear skies. They had thought I would panic first, that I would rush back, that I would cave the moment the mortgage slipped into delinquency. They believed I needed the house more than they needed me. They miscalculated. Terribly. I watched their expressions change over days. Curiosity turned to concern turned to fear, fear turned to anger. They cornered me in the living room at one point, demanding answers, demanding I explain. Why on earth I would do something like this? My mother's voice trembled between rage and pleading. "This is our home," she said, emphasizing the word as if saying it enough times could reverse everything.
You can't just let it go. We trusted you.
That was the moment something inside me snapped into perfect clarity. I looked her in the eyes and replied, calmly and without apology, "You trusted me to be useful, not to belong." The room went painfully silent. My father's face went pale. My sister stopped fidgeting. Even the walls seemed to listen. They weren't mourning the loss of me. They were mourning the potential loss of the house, the comfort, the stability that I had been providing. Their sudden interest in reconciliation had nothing to do with love or family. It had everything to do with fear and consequences. For once, they were the ones standing on shaky ground, and I was the one who didn't need anything from them. The final blow came a few days later, when they received the official foreclosure warning, the one with the bold red text that screamed urgency. My mother stormed into my room, clutching the letter, accusing, wailing, begging all at once. She insisted it was my responsibility to fix this. She claimed that families support each other. She argued that I was punishing them unfairly. I let her vent, watching the storm pass through her like a child having a tantrum. Then I quietly said, "I stopped supporting people who told me I didn't matter." She stood there, stunned. She had no script for this version of me. The version who didn't bend, didn't apologize, didn't rush to soothe wounds that weren't mine to heal. For the first time in my life, I watched her struggle to find words because she understood, too late, that the power she once held over me was gone. Word spread quickly among extended relatives. Some called to scold me, insisting I was being dramatic. Others called to stay neutral, which was their cowardly way of saying they didn't want to upset the majority. A few whispered that they understood, but none of them stepped forward publicly. It didn't matter. I had stopped looking for approval in places that were never meant for me. The foreclosure went through. My family scrambled. They blamed each other. They blamed me. They blamed timing, finances, holidays, anything except the truth. They had pushed away the one person holding everything together. And while they moved into cramped rentals, arguing over what went wrong, I started fresh, lighter, freer, finally untangled from the emotional debts they had used to chain me down. Their return, their panic, and their downfall weren't victories I celebrated with fireworks or triumph. They were quiet, inevitable consequences, proof that when people take someone for granted long enough, they eventually lose what they never appreciated in the first place. And in the ruins of everything they thought they controlled, I rebuilt myself, not out of revenge, but out of the peace that comes from finally walking away.